Fantastic. Well, welcome everybody to Barkfest, a canine crime and mystery with authors Antony Johnston, Louisa Scarr, and Philipp Schott. I'm Zazie Todd. I'm the author of WAG, The Science of Making Your Dog Happy, Purr, The Science of Making Your Cat Happy, and my new book, Bark, The Science of Helping Your Anxious, Fearful, or Reactive Dog, which is available for pre-order now, and which was really the impetus for putting this together. And we're going to have a wonderful time today. I'm so excited to hear these authors, but before I introduce them, I just got a little bit of housekeeping. So you will see that there is a chat box and a Q&A box. Please let me know in the chat where you're joining us from, because it's nice to see people are coming from all over the world to take part in Barkfest. Please use the Q&A for your questions. We will have some time for questions at the end. If your question is for a specific author, please put their name at the start of the question, and the Q&A box means that we can find them at the end. This is being recorded, and the recording will go out in about 3 days' time because I need a little bit of time to process the recording. And as well as that, everyone who is here and attending live has a chance to win a copy of the books from this session. So we have The Dog Sitter Detective Takes the Lead by Antony Johnston. We have Gallows Wood by Louisa Scarr. And we have 11 Huskies by Dr. Philipp Schott. And these are all absolutely wonderful books. And there's also a chance to win a copy of Bark. And those can go to anywhere in the world, but they might be print copies or ebook copies, depending on where the winner happens to be. So I'm joined, as always, by my friend and colleague, Christy Benson, who most of you know as my co-host on the Positive Posting Conversation podcast. But she's also a Northern anthropologist, an amazing dog trainer, and a staff member at the Academy for Dog Trainers. So also joining us today, we've got Antony Johnston, who is one of the most versatile writers of the modern era, with a body of work spanning books, film, graphic novels, video games, and nonfiction. He's an award-winning author and New York Times bestseller, and his creations include Atomic Blonde, The Dog Sitter Detective, and the Bridget Sharp thrillers, and many more. Welcome, Antony. We're also joined by Louisa Scarr, who studied psychology at the University of Southampton and has lived in and around the city ever since. She works as a freelance copywriter and editor, and when she's not writing, she can be found pounding the streets in running shoes or swimming in muddy lakes. She's the author of the Butler and West crime series, published by Canelo Crime, beginning with Last Place You Look and ending with Out of the Ashes in July 2023. A new series, which we're hearing about today, about a police dog handler, launched this year with Gallows Wood. She also writes as Sam Holland and is the author of the award-winning major crime series, following detectives as they investigate murders committed by brutal serial killers in the south of England. The Echo Man and the 20 are out now, and the Puppet Master, I think, is also out now too.
Yeah.
Welcome, Louisa.
Hello, good to be here.
And we're also joined by Philipp Schott DVM, who was born in Germany and emigrated to Canada with his family when he was very young. He grew up in Saskatoon, ultimately studying veterinary medicine there. After graduation, he moved to Winnipeg with his classmate and wife, Lorraine. He's worked in the same small animal clinic ever since, and his best-selling first book, The Accidental Veterinarian, was translated into 5 languages. He's published 6 more books since in several different genres, and he and his wife, Lorraine, live in a creaky old house on the river with 2 young adult children and a cat who is simultaneously crazy and sweet. Welcome, Philipp.
Thank you.
So thank you all for joining us today, and we are actually just going to pose for a photo so that everybody in the audience has the opportunity to take a photo. So I'm going to ask the authors to hold up a copy of their book, if you don't mind. And if someone can tell me in the chat, got it when you've got the picture, please. Okay, we'll assume you've got it because you can always get it from the recording anyway. Thank you. So we're going to start by talking to Antony Johnston about his book, The Dog Sitter Detective Takes the Lead, which I absolutely loved. I said on Instagram, I read this and I immediately had to go out and buy the first one because this is the second in the series. But just so everyone knows, you can read it on its own like I did if you want to. So tell us about this book, The Dog Sitter Detective Takes the Lead.
Sure. And I just realized that I was muted when I said hello earlier. So sorry. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Yeah, so The Dog Sitter Detective Takes the Lead, as you say, is the second book in the Dog Sitter Detective series. The first book is simply called The Dog Sitter Detective. It's a series starring Gwinny Tuffel, who is a semi-retired actress who takes up dog sitting to make ends meet when she retires to look after her father, who's ill. A decade later, her father dies and leaves her pretty much penniless. And so Gwynny has to try to revive her acting career at the ripe old age of 60, while also trying to sort of maintain the house that she's been left, which is falling down around her ears. And of course, while she's doing this, she keeps stumbling across dead bodies that have been killed in baffling ways that only she can solve, with the help of the dogs that she is sitting. So in the first book, she's at a wedding when the bridegroom is killed, and she winds up looking after a pair of Salukis while investigating that crime. And in this book, the dog sitter detective takes the lead. She's dog sitting a border collie called Ace for an aging rock star called Crash Double. Crash is leaving the country for a few days to go and perform a concert in Dublin. He lives on a houseboat in Little Venice in London. And so he hires Gwynny to look after Ace, to stay on the houseboat and look after Ace while he's away in Dublin over a bank holiday weekend, which also happens to be when there is a carnival in Little Venice, a barge and canal carnival, which he can't abide. So he's glad to get out of the city. But unfortunately, Crash's body during the carnival turns up in the canal, floating in the water. He never made it out of London, let alone out of the country. And so it is up to Gwynny with Ace, the border collie, and her friend, a retired detective called Birch, who has a black lab called Ronnie. And the four of them together, it's up to them to solve the mystery. The police think that Crash committed suicide and drowned himself in the canal, but Gwynny doesn't believe that. She refuses to believe that, and so goes about investigating his death.
And Gwinny Tuffel is a really fun character. So how did you come up with the idea for a book with her as the amateur detective?
So it came about partly just because of the genre that I started to write. So I started writing the dog sitter detective during the first COVID lockdown. And I was writing it really just for myself. I wasn't even thinking about publication. And I wrote it basically to cheer myself up as much as anything. So I wanted a character who would be kind of light-hearted, but also could help with a bit of representation. Believe it or not, at the time when I started writing, older women detectives were not a common sight in crime fiction. Now it seems that you can't swing a cat or a dog without hitting one, but at the time they weren't all that common. So I thought, well, I'll do that. And I made her a former actress because I have acting experience. I acted a lot when I was younger, amateur, not professionally, but still. Because I have experience of showbiz through Atomic Blonde and my work writing screenplays, I know a bit about that life and that world and the behind the scenes. So I felt that I could write a convincing actor character. And then, of course, she had to be a dog lover. So I made her a lifelong dog lover who had a succession of adopted dogs through a family as she was growing up. And so all these things came together to create this character who I came to kind of fall in love with while I was writing, because she's flawed, definitely, and she's not polished either. She has more than a few sort of sharp edges and occasionally rubs people up the wrong way, but I kind of like that about her. She's like a naughty schoolgirl sometimes, which I think is a delightful aspect of the character, and I just really enjoy writing her.
I love her for sure. And I have to ask you about the dogs as well, because each book in the series features a different breed of dog. So how do you go about deciding what kind of dog you want to include and actually writing that dog as a character?
Lots of research, which is probably the best part of the job, getting to, sort of learn about and meet loads of different kinds of dogs. Yeah, I decided early on that to make it a series, to vary things throughout the series, I would have her looking after a different breed of dog in each one. So like I said, in the first book, she's looking after a pair of Salukis. In the second book, it's a Border Collie. In the third book, it's which is coming out next year, it's a Jack Russell Terrier. And the reason for that actually is because I used to own a pair of lurchers that were both Saluki crosses. I grew up with a Border Collie in my family, and my partner grew up with a Jack Russell Terrier in her family. So that was actually how I decided the first three. From that point onwards, obviously, I'm going to have to find new breeds. but how they work into the story is kind of organic. It's, you know, the kind of story and the way that the investigation develops kind of relies on what the dog is. So the dogs in these books, they're not magical. They're not, you know, they're not Lassie or sort of psychic or anything like that. They are just realistic, ordinary dogs. But as we all know, as dog lovers, every breed of dog has its own characteristics, its own habits, you know, the things it prefers to do, the things it's good at. And so I wanted to incorporate those into the story. So everybody knows, for example, Border Collies, smartest dogs on the planet. You know, you won't find a more intelligent breed. And so that plays into the story in the second book quite a bit. You know, Ace's ability to sniff things out and to understand commands and do things under his own initiative is actually a big part of the story, and it affects how the investigation plays out. So, like, it's a lot of back and forth between what I want the story to be and what kind of story it has to be to suit the breed of dog. So I've kind of made a rod for my own back. It's only going to get more difficult as the series goes on. I realize that, but you know, I'm having fun.
Good, good. And he's definitely a real character, like not just a prop to the story. He has an important role to play too. So,
Very much.
yeah. And as I alluded to in your introduction, you write across many different genres, including video games. So what do you especially like about writing cozy crime like The Dog Sitter Detective?
I guess it's mostly that it makes me smile while I'm writing it. So as you say, I write a lot of different stuff. In video games, for example, I kind of specialize in sci-fi and horror, which are obviously not genres that, you know, are known for being light-hearted. So I get plenty of, you know, grim and gritty action when I'm writing those things. So cozy, yeah, it just makes me smile while I'm writing it. It makes me laugh. You know, I happily admit that I laugh at my own jokes all the time. I figure if I don't laugh at them, nobody else is going to, you know. But also specifically with cozy, one of the things I like about cozy, because I've been a cozy reader pretty much my whole life, and I love watching cozy stuff on TV. But until I wrote this series, I hadn't written any cozy. And one of the things that I love about it is the fact that it's so focused on the puzzle, you know, and the puzzle of the crime really takes center stage in cozies, and you can get really elaborate puzzles as a result, really elaborate crimes and things that you're trying to work out as a reader while you're reading them. And for me as a writer, I like the challenge of kind of pitting my wits against the reader, because most crime readers, and especially cozy readers these days, are really familiar with the form. They know the classics, they know all the tricks. It's a bit like being a magician. You know that the audience is watching you as closely as they can to figure out how you're doing it. And it's kind of like that being a cozy writer, because you're so focused on the puzzle. You're trying to outwit the readers and misdirect them and pull the wool over their eyes a little bit, all the while knowing that readers are looking for that and they're expecting it and they're going to be trying to, do the opposite. So I really enjoy that. I just think that's a great challenge. It makes the books a lot of fun to write. And yeah, it just means that it's a really enjoyable process.
I love that. And so you're already talking a bit about the process, but we know that you're a very organized writer because you have a book of that title, The Organized Writer. So tell us something else about your process in writing these dog sitter detective books.
Oh, there you go. It's just behind me. There you go. Yeah, I can't help it. I talk about process whenever I talk about writing because I'm that's just the way my brain is wired, I suppose. So one of the things that I do when writing any book, and that includes the Dog Sitter Detectives books, my process, my sort of habit, and the one bit of advice that I always give to people who might be struggling to be productive or to meet a deadline or to finish a book is that I write to a word count quota, a minimum, every day. And so when I'm writing the Dog Sitter Detective books, my word count is 1,000 words a day. So every day I come here to this desk first thing in the morning, and I do that before I check my social media, before I check my email, any of that, and I start writing. And only when I've written 1,000 words am I allowed to then do anything else. Now, if I'm feeling good, if I'm in the zone, actually I might write 2,000 words. I'll just keep going. That those days are great. Obviously that doesn't happen all the time. But as long as I hit that 1,000-word minimum, then I give myself permission to stop that, check my email, etc., etc. And doing that, in making that a discipline, getting into that habit, just makes me really productive. And, I know has made other people really productive, because it's one of the things I talk about in The Organized Writer. It's how I know that I'm going to hit my deadlines, because I plan out how much I need to write when I need to start writing in order to meet my deadlines using that word count minimum. So I find that really useful.
Great, thank you. And we know that you've prepared a reading for us from The Dog Sitter Detective Takes the Lead. So we're going to go off camera just while you do your reading.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So this is from about a third of the way through the book. As I said, Crash Double has already turned up floating in the canal, and the police have been called. Detective Chief Superintendent Fletcher is on the case, and the police are now investigating Crash Double's houseboat in Little Venice. And this chapter begins just as they have opened his wall safe. They've managed to crack open his wall safe and get into it. Birch and I crowded into the lounge behind DCS Fletcher to see what her officers had found. Unfortunately, everyone there apart from the dogs was taller than me, so my view was completely blocked. I stood on tiptoes, one hand on Birch's shoulder for balance, and could just make out the superintendent removing items from the safe. Constable Wright whistled, impressed. "What's in it?" I asked. "Passport, set of keys, notebook," she said, while Constable Wright took notes. "A substantial amount of money, too. That must be, what, a few thousand?" "Well, at least," said the constable. "Well, so much for Crash protesting he was broke," I said. "All this time he had money stuffed away in his safe. No wonder someone tried to break into it." Fletcher opened the passport. "Well, this is definitely Mr. Donnelly's. The keys look well used." Donnelly is Crash's real name. "Probably his old house keys," I said, "from before he had the locks changed. What's in the notebook?" The DCS flipped through it and shrugged. "Poetry." "Poetry?" said Birch, his ears pricking up like a dog hearing a whistle. "You mean song lyrics?" "Well, Crash was a singer," I smiled. "Surely that's not unusual." The former policeman shook his head. "But there's been no new Bad Dice material for 25 years. He gasped. "A new album!" He said it with such wide-eyed excitement that I immediately pictured him as a long-haired young man sitting on the floor and listening rapt to a hi-fi. Birch could be so gruff and, well, old at times that I'd never imagined him as a young man before. It was a pleasant thought. "Seems like overkill to put them in a safe," said DCS Fletcher. Mind you, it was his livelihood. "Could I see them?" Birch asked. "You never know. Bit of knowledge can't hurt." Fletcher saw through this transparent excuse, but passed him the notebook anyway. "You'll never get to hear them now, so go ahead. Glove up." Birch donned a pair of latex gloves supplied by Constable Wright, then began to leaf through the pages. I thought of the recording studio upstairs on the boat, and Crash and Ace dancing together as they had earlier. The notebook was about half full of lines and lyrics, all scribbled, scratched out, underlined, and circled. There was no need to ask Birch if this was all new material. It was plain from his expression. The police were understandably distracted by the more pressing matters of Crash's passport, the presence of which confirmed he hadn't been en route to the airport, and the bundles of cash in the safe. So I whipped out my phone, made sure it was on silent, and started snapping pictures of the notebook. Cottoning on, Birch grinned and leafed through the pages, pausing briefly on each so I could take a photo. We reached the end of the lyrics, and he turned over a few blank pages before flipping it closed. But as he did, I saw something and nudged him to open the back page again. It wasn't like the others. Instead of scrawled lines and margin doodles, this page contained several lines of random letters and numbers. Then underneath was the name of a management company and an email address. It meant nothing to me, but maybe it had something to do with Crash's recording studio upstairs. "Birch, how are you getting on?" said DCS Fletcher suddenly. I took a final hasty photo, then hid my phone behind my back as she turned to us and held out a hand for the notebook. "Confirmed all new as far as I could see," he said. "Damn shame." I wondered about the idea that the notebook was in the safe because it was Crash's livelihood. Were his lyrics really that valuable? Or was there more to this than meets the eye? Fletcher sealed the notebook inside an evidence bag, while I tried to ignore Ronnie licking my hand behind my back. The Labrador must have thought I was hiding a treat from him, and knowing Labs, if I wasn't careful, he might try to eat my phone. I really don't think Crash killed himself, I said, pretending to look for a tissue in my handbag so I could surreptitiously slip my phone back inside. Crash was in good spirits. He was writing new lyrics, making new music, and looking forward to the Dublin concerts. That's a funny thing, said the superintendent. Suicidal people are often said to have been in a good mood right before they do themselves in. The shrinks say it's because they've finally made up their mind and feel free of responsibility at last. Well, that's terrible, I said. How depressed must someone be to think that way? She grimaced. Well, by definition, enough to kill themselves. You can't get much more depressed than that. By now, Ace had padded over to see what Ronnie was so interested in. I reached down to stroke his head, wondering what could become of the collie in the long term. Perhaps Ace would have to go to a local rescue. You don't have pets, do you, Superintendent? I asked. Fletcher looked at me with surprise. Well, what makes you say that? It's hard enough saying goodbye to a family pet when it's their time to go. I can't believe anyone who's been through that would kill themselves without first making arrangements for their dog to be rehomed. In my experience, she said, motivations are rarely so neat or clearly thought out. Whether or not this was suicide or an accident, I fear we may never know. But it will take a lot more than what we have so far to convince me it was anything else. Well, I do love a challenge. That's the end of that chapter.
I love that. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Perfect. Beautiful
You're welcome.
reading.
I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, very much enjoyed that. Awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to hand over to Christy now to speak to Louisa.
Thank you, Zazie, and thank you for that reading. That was great always to hear it in the author's voice, I think. So Louisa, can you tell us about your book, Gallows Wood?
Yes, certainly. So Gallows Wood, the whole series, features a police dog handler called PC Lucy Halliday and her specialist search dog Moss. So Gallows Wood begins as she is called out to a wood where a hand has been found, a human hand, and their job is to find the rest of the body, which they do, of course, but there's something about this case which reminds Lucy of something closer to home, of her husband who disappeared 2 years ago. So she wants to keep investigating, but the new DI is Jack Ellis, and rightfully so, he wants Lucy far, far away from this case. But the call of the woods is strong. So her and Moss, Lucy and Moss, return to the woods. Now, I won't say what they find because that's the book. But I will say, you know, there's lots of lovely, fluffy police dogs. You never know who you're going to trust. Shades of Line of Duty in there. And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I loved reading this. I mean, I find your writing really compelling. And it was one of those books where you start to feel like you're in it, like you start to feel it and you're reading it and you're like, I'm getting a little stressed. So it was really good. So in the book, PC Lucy Halliday has a human remains detection dog named Moss. Moss is based on your own dog, Max. And we know that Max couldn't be with you tonight, but tell us about him and how Max influenced your descriptions of Moss.
So I'm in a Premier Inn. This is not my house. I'm in a Premier Inn tonight, which is why I don't have Max here. He's at home with my husband. So we got Max, or I got Max because he's my dog, definitely not my husband's, from a puppy, and he is a working Cocker Spaniel crossed with a Springer. So anybody that's met Spaniels knows this is a terrible, terrible combination. So very smart, very high energy, absolute nightmare puppy. I didn't sleep, nothing, drove me absolutely bonkers. So my dog trainer said, you need to take him to scent training to give him, to tire his brain out, to give him something to do. So I did as she says. He loved it, didn't tire him out. He just got more and more excited. But it did give me the idea. And I was chatting to my agent one day and just said, what about a police dog handler, a cadaver dog, basically? And he said, yes, write it. So I did, and that's where it comes from. So basically, Moss in the book is pretty much Max to a T, except that obviously Max is not a police dog. He's just a domestic at home, drive me nuts dog. But yeah, basically they're the same dog, and it was really just fun, just kind of observing the things he does and then putting it in the book for Lucy. Both the sort of characteristic, and what Anthony said is very true. They have their own character and his characteristics, both the sort of like the downside, because he does, now he's a bit older, he does have a downside, but also when he's out and about and sniffing and you just see the tail go up and you think, oh no, that's it, and he's gone. He's after a pheasant and you'll see him 3 hours later with a pheasant in his mouth, and I'm just feeling, oh no. So yeah, that's Max basically. Sorry, not Moss, Max.
That's awesome. My wife and I have separate dogs too. And I think some people don't understand, but I'm like, no, there are definitely.
Yeah, he's
She
definitely on
actually
my list.
has a Springer crossed with a herding dog. Yeah, and I'm hearing sort of like, oh yeah, I see that. Like there's a lot of your dog just.
Yes, yeah. Oh, I get that. My husband's very much your dog. Just yeah, I know.
So Lucy Halliday has a tricky route to becoming a police dog handler. Without giving away any spoilers, what can you tell us about Halliday and her relationship with her dog?
Yeah, so Lucy, I mean, she's obviously she's a detective in a book, well, she's a PC, and so she of course has a complicated backstory. She has secrets, because I know it's a trope, but books would be very boring if our detectives didn't have secrets. So she does, but her childhood was very much. She was an only child. She had some couple of rescue dogs, which were basically her best friends, which she grew up with and training them. And she joined the police force because she wanted something to keep herself busy. And that route, she ends up actually as a DI in the major crimes team. But something happens, which we won't go too much into detail because that's the plot, which sees her going back to the rank of PC and taking a sideways move into the dog unit, the dog handling team. So at the beginning of the book, she's not so sure that's what she wants to be. She's obviously loving being with the dog and she's very used to being around dogs and she's got a natural aptitude for it. But because of the circumstances with her ending there, she's not quite sure. So you see that sort of journey as we go through the book. And by the end, she's very much a settled member of the dog unit.
So your book is a police procedural, and it seems like you know a lot about how these things work. So how did you do research for this book?
So I've written police procedurals before. One of my best friends is a PC, and he's done everything under the sun. He's done detective work, he's done undercover work. So he's really helpful in that. Yeah, he basically just gives me an overview of how these things work, and I can call on him and ask questions. I was very fortunate to be put in touch with a police dog handler for this book, and Paul is retired now, and he's worked as a dog handler all his life, and now he works as an instructor, and he sources puppies. So he's always got, a big white van, and he's always got a couple of puppies in tow, like a Labrador, a Malinois. And he knows everything there is to know about police dog handling in Hampshire. And very fortunate, he's a brilliant storyteller as well. So he'll tell me all these stories about what he's been doing. And luckily for me, I get to put that in a book each time. So yeah, so I'm currently writing the third book. So Gallows Wood was the first that's out now. Memorial Park is this one that I was holding up earlier. That's out next February. And that's about a missing child and all about the sort of tracking. And because Lucy gets another dog, she gets a German Shepherd for book 2 called Iggy, and he's a track and attack. Is a general purpose dog. So he does the traditional dog that you will see in a lot of the videos with the teeth and the barky. And yeah, she does that in Memorial Park. And then the third one, which I'm currently writing, has a data dog, which I think is fascinating, or a digi dog, and they find SIM cards and memory sticks and laptops, and it's just fascinating what they can do. It's really interesting for me. I love it.
Yeah, for sure. You need to learn about all that as part of your, as part of your job almost,
Yeah.
So we've been told that you write books very quickly, which is great because it means we don't have to wait too long for the next book in the series. So what's your writing process like?
It's probably very similar to Anthony's, to be honest. I'm quite strict with myself in that I don't believe in waiting for the muse to come to me. I have a desk, not this one obviously, but I have a desk at home, and I go there after the school run's done and after the dog's walked. Me and Max go in. He now lies on the sofa. He's got his way after 4 years and now lies on the sofa. But yeah, and then I just sit and I write until the school bus comes back again. But I think at the beginning I write quite freely. I'm not quite, I know the bare bones of the plot, but I'm not quite sure. And it's that act of writing, I think, which really gets me to know where we're going this time and where the characters are going. And then once I've got a very messy, I wouldn't even call it a first draft, just words basically, I go back and I plot it all. Actually, I've probably got some cards somewhere here. When I've lost them, I plot them on cards, which I then stick up on the board and really perfectly plot it out and make sure it fits the plot and make sure it makes sense and all the clues are in the right place. And write notes like need more dog, when I've got a whole chapter and there's a dog there somewhere, but I haven't mentioned it at all. So I have to go back and put the dogs back in and all that sort of stuff.
Wow.
So and that whole process takes about 3 to 4 months to get a whole sort of first draft, which is good enough to go to the editor, and then of course they always come back, unfortunately, and you have to but yeah, it takes about 3 to 4 months to get to that point at least.
Wow, that's fast. In my mind, I went to like that meme with the guy with like the red string and the cards and the.
It's a bit like that, yeah. If you go to my Instagram, you'll see the cards on the whiteboard. They're sort of, it's not quite as crazy maybe, but it's similar. Me explaining the plot is to my editor is very much like lots of hand waving and her looking at me confused. But yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so it's time for your reading now. So we'll all go off camera.
Oh, okay. It's a bit dark in here. I need to maybe put a light on. But so this starts as Lucy and Moss begin their search. All eyes are on Lucy as she and Moss head to the edge of the woodland, to the path where the missing limb was found. Aware of how the smell coming from the dismembered body part might interfere with the search, she moves away from the group, directing Moss into the trees. He strains on his harness, his tail raised, his nose forward. He looks back to her, waiting. She assesses the area. It's open, free from danger, so she unclips the lead. She gives the command, and they go. He's fast. Lucy keeps as close as she can, directing him, look, look, but for the most part, she lets Moss work. The dog will always be quicker than the human, but the spaniel has more to do. Her purpose is to focus the search, but for now she follows his guidance, letting him roam. They make their way deeper into the forest. The undergrowth is no match for a small spaniel, but Lucy finds herself scratched and tripped, hurrying around bushes and brambles, trying to keep the dog in sight. Occasionally Moss pauses, sniffing for the scent, and then he's off again, head weaving in search of his quarry. The radio crackles on her shoulder. She ignores it. She knows they're eager, but the dog needs time. Conditions are right, damp with dew, gentle breeze, long grass. If it's there, if the wind speed and direction is on their side, and if the dog doesn't tire, they'll find it. And if not, she's learned that it's not her fault, and it's certainly not Moss's. She can feel their circling back. The noise of the road and the crime scene return in her periphery as they continue through the wood. The brambles have lessened, the ground becoming more hospitable, but Lucy's aware they've been out for a while. Maybe they need to put together a proper plan to methodically comb through the woodland. An open area search is good for speed, if it works. She's contemplating turning around when the dog abruptly stops. His nose goes up, nostrils quivering. Every inch of him is poised. She recognizes the signs. He has a scent. Her body tenses in response. It could be a false positive. Out here, dead animals are common. She encourages the dog forward. He heads off again, darting this way and that, his body language different, all senses on alert. Until he stops, absolutely still, his nose pointing to a patch of ground. She slams the brakes on. He's found something. Lucy's heart beats hard. This is what they're here for. It's happened 100 times before, but it never gets any easier. Lucy takes a step forward. She doesn't want to call it in until she's sure. She bends down and pulls back a branch, a scrap of checked shirt, blue and green. She clears away more leaves. A torso is revealed, and a leg. Tattered jeans rendered brown from the elements. She can't tear her eyes away. Moss is still completely motionless, and she signals her praise with a quick yes, then pulls a ball out on a rope out of her pocket. He snatches it eagerly, chomping happily. He knows his job is done. Someone else's is beginning. She reaches for the radio on her shoulder. X-ray Delta 29, got a find, need you to come to scene. You have him? Most of him, she replies, and checks off her coordinates, relaying them down the radio. She's about to call the dog away when something tugs on the corner of her consciousness. A flicker of recognition. That shirt. She pauses. She needs to go. Step away now. She shouldn't contaminate the scene further. But this could be it. The answer to the question that's haunted her for years, that ruined her life, her career. She takes another step. She moves the foliage away from the body, from the face, his face. It's definitely a man, eaten away by animals, leaving white bone, flaps of skin, features almost unrecognizable. Almost unrecognizable. Her heart thumps in her ears, her breathing quickens, her vision blurs, and as her muscles turn to mush, the last thing she hears is Fran's voice. It's not him, Lucy. It's not him.
That was beautiful. Thank you. So much tension in that scene. That was a beautiful reading. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so we're going to move on to Philipp Schott, Dr. Schott, and learning about your book. And I'm really thrilled to have you as part of this because my book club actually read one of your other books, The Accidental Veterinarian, and we all loved it. So that's why I thought everyone was going to love 11 Huskies as well, by definition. So please tell us about 11 Huskies.
All right, yeah, thank you. So 11 Huskies is the third in my Dr. Bannerman vet mystery series. First two, 54 pigs. Second one, 6 ostriches. You kind of see a pattern there. It's delivered. So 11 Huskies. Bannerman, veterinarian, flies north with his family. I live in Manitoba. It's all pretty much set in Manitoba. So northern Manitoba is all wilderness, just rocks and trees and lakes. They fly there for a holiday, a canoeing holiday. His wife, his brother-in-law, who's an RCMP officer, and his brother-in-law's partner, and of course Pippin, Peter and Laura's dog. They go north to a flying fishing lodge where 11 Huskies are ill. This lodge owner has a sled team and the dogs are ill, and Peter rapidly determines that it's been a poisoning. I'm going to say right now, the dogs don't die. So this is really important because in 54 pigs, all the pigs die in the first page, and I got so much blowback on that. Book was positively received, except by people who were expecting a cute story about a lot of pigs. So the pigs all turn into bacon very rapidly. So all the ostriches survive and all the Huskies survive. So it's not much of a spoiler because it's not that tied into the plot. Anyway, so there are some human deaths, however. These are murder mysteries after all. So around the same time, a float plane has crashed into the lake and it's determined that that was murder. So Peter trying to have his holiday, but at the same time, he's drawn to these. He's drawn to puzzles and trying to figure that he doesn't really believe in coincidence. He's got a mathematical mind, understands about probabilities and so forth, very focused on that. Maybe there's some way to tie this together, the poisonings and the crash. So that's takes off from there.
And Dr. Bannerman's pet dog, Pippin, has a very special nose and perhaps a little bit unusual in some ways. So tell us about his sniffing abilities and also how he and Dr. Bannerman work together.
Right. So, one of the things I wanted to do with these books, and specifically then regarding Pippin, is just open, and I think Louisa is doing this a little bit too, just kind of peel it open a little bit for humans to understand how narrow our view of the world is. Like, we're such a visual species, right? So we really understand the world through what we see, a little bit through what we hear, but primarily we think that is the world, the objects that we see. To understand that other species, and particularly in this case dogs, understand the world completely differently. Their sensory reality is entirely different than ours. The way they construct reality has all sorts of interesting implications. So in these books, it becomes very handy because he's a particularly gifted scent finder, and he and Peter have a particularly strong bond. And because of Peter's interest in kind of dabbling a little bit in figuring out mysteries, Pippin's sense of smell comes in handy.
It does. And so this book is set in northern Manitoba, so it's a different setting than the previous two books. And it's actually very evocative of the landscape there. We hear loons calling and so on. So what made you decide to set the book there in northern Manitoba?
Two things. First of all, the first two books were set in New Selfos, the fictional town, Icelandic Canadian town on the opposite side of the lake from Gimli, which is an actual Icelandic Canadian town. And so when I first pitched this to my series to my editor, he said, okay, yeah, small town murder mystery. You know what about these small town murder mysteries? How do the demographics work out? Like everybody's going to be dead by the end of the series, right? So you may want to take them off-site occasionally. So, okay, by the time third book, it's time to take them off-site. That was reason one. Reason two is that I love the North. In fact, just yesterday, I was in Whiteshell Provincial Park doing a hike just across the granite ridges and through now the aspens are starting to turn color and the glistening blue lakes and so forth. It's fabulous. It's really what Canada is all about from my perspective. So I want to introduce international readers particularly to this idea, the soul of Canada, if you will.
That definitely comes through. And so you're a veterinarian as well as a writer, and Dr. Bannerman is a veterinarian. But what made you decide to also become a writer? How did that come about? And how did this book series or your first books come about?
Yeah. So, the title of the first book gives a clue, The Accidental Veterinarian. Unlike most of my colleagues, I didn't have any idea of being a veterinarian when I was growing up. All my colleagues, including my wife, who's a veterinarian, before they could even pronounce the word, it's a difficult word, right? Veterinarian. They knew that's what they wanted to do. It's one of those things like astronaut or firefighter that just little children just glom onto, and a lot of people are carried with that. Most of my classmates and colleagues are carried by that passion right through. I didn't have that. I didn't have any pets growing up. I didn't dislike the idea. It just wasn't part of my Weltumschau, German word, my world perspective. And so I dabbled in writing growing up, and in fact, in first year university, I took an English class and was offered a fellowship to pursue that. But my father, German physicist, said, Philipp, yeah, this is very good. However, you must put bread on the table for your family. So get a profession and you can do this in your spare time. I said, all right. I was a freakishly obedient 18-year-old. Says, oh, okay, I gotta get a profession. And I flipped through the university course calendar. It was an actual book in those days. Alphabetical it was. Rejected everything with the arrogance of the average 18-year-old until I landed on the very last thing, veterinarian and veterinary medicine. And I didn't have an objection. So I thought, okay, let's do this. And I was interested in animals for sure. So I became a veterinarian accidentally, essentially, or inadvertently. And then the writing was always in the background. But it turns out veterinary medicine is a good entree into writing. Like when I pitched my first book, pets are having their cultural moment, long may it last. So it was I got a reply in 20 minutes saying, yeah, show us more. We want this.
Excellent. Yes, well, I'm glad they did that. That's good for everyone else who gets to read the books. And so in 11 Huskies, without giving anything away, the action really builds through the book. Did you go into writing it already having planned that, or what was your process in writing this book?
Yeah, so, like Louisa and Antony, in some ways, I'm very organized. I also have a word count because I've got a parallel career. I can't do it daily, so I have a weekly word count. It was 3,000 words while I was working full time. Now it's I've upped it to 5,000 words a week. So sometimes it clumps to 2,000 or 3,000 words a day, but it just has to because of my schedule. But I'm pretty strict about that. I just start to write. But the disorganized aspect is I start with an image in my mind. I know how it starts. Like there's usually it's very visual, and I know how it ends. And I've got that in mind too, very specifically, also very visual. And a couple of points I want to hit along the way, like in the case of 11 Huskies, I wanted to be in the north, and I wanted a forest fire to be part of it. But the rest of it, it just sort of happens, you just start to write, and then you realize, okay, this is kind of good. I like this. And then that builds. I realized then, for example, that forest fire, that could become a bigger plot point than I thought it was going to be, and drive elements of the plot forward towards the end and create, build the tension and so forth. So that just happened kind of organically.
Interesting. So I think this is a good moment to ask you to do your reading from the book so that we can hear it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we're going to read actually from the forest fire scene. And specifically, I wanted to pull the passage that involves Pippin because we're talking about dogs here. So they have been camping in the forest, canoe camping in the wilderness, and a forest fire has suddenly arisen. So they realize they need to get back to the lodge. So they're scrambling to get back to the lodge. The fire is in the area where they would normally portage across, so they're kind of bushwhacking somewhat to try and get away from it. Not 10 meters ahead of where Laura and Pippin had stopped, several trees were engulfed in flames. This must have happened in seconds. There had been no indication of fire in the immediate area, and now suddenly there was this hellish conflagration. A wave of heat hit them, causing all four of them to step back. Pippin stayed put, sniffing the ground intensively in an arc around him. "It's blocking the trail," Laura said, panting and wiping the soot from her face. "You okay?" Peter asked. Yeah, just shaken up." "We cannot go this way," Stuart said. Stuart is Kevin's partner. Kevin's the RCMP guy. "Is it the only path?" "There's nothing else on the map," Laura said. "Back to Parsons? Maybe wait it out on the water?" Parsons being a lake, Peter suggested. "Not a terrible idea," Kevin said, rubbing his beard and looking a little forlorn now they had lost his momentum, "but not a great idea either. If we use the canoe as a heat shield, plus those wet shirts, we can probably sprint through that." "Probably?" Peter asked, incredulous at the suggestion. Just then, a flaming tree crashed down ahead of them, and several more caught fire. The heat was becoming intolerable. All of them were coughing in the thickening smoke, all of them except Pippin, as the air was clearer, closer to the ground. "Okay, maybe not," Kevin said. Then Pippin let out a short, sharp bark and began trotting off to the right, perpendicular to the path. "What's he doing?" Kevin asked as he swiveled to watch the dog. "I guess he's found an alternative route," Peter said. "Really? There?" Kevin stared where Pippin was disappearing into the dense thicket of smoke-shrouded trees. There wasn't even a deer track, but there was no undergrowth either, so at least it was passable. "I trust him," Peter said, and positioned himself to pick up his end of the canoe. "Me too," Laura said. "We have no time. We have no choice," Stuart said, and then doubled over with a short but intense coughing fit. When he recovered, he looked at Kevin and said, "Pick up the canoe." Without a word, Kevin did as he was told, and they set off to follow Pippin. They moved as quickly as they could, but maneuvering the canoe under the branches was difficult, and the ground was uneven. Peter and Kevin stumbled frequently, Kevin cursing under his breath, Peter hoping fervently that Pippin knew what he was doing. The dog would disappear into the smoke up ahead and then stop and wait for Laura, who was in front, to catch up. Peter was able to faintly make Pippin out when this happened. From his silhouette, he pictured him with a big doggy smile, his ears erect and his eyes wide and shining. Whether the dog had a sense of fear in the situation was unclear to Peter. If he did, then adventure and duty were likely overriding it. After ensuring he had been seen, Pippin would trot off again into the gray, nose down, tail up. "Arg!" Kevin shouted as the bow of the canoe snagged on an especially unyielding branch. "Back up, Pete. We're totally snared here. This is friggin' nuts. We'll have to carry it low by the gunnels." After much grunting and swearing and some ineffectual efforts by Stuart and Laura to help, they disentangled the canoe and lowered it to the ground. In the brief moment of silence that ensued, Peter could hear the fire crackling and roaring behind them and to the left. He turned to look, but there were no flames visible, only the dense gray pall. He looked up and could see the tops of the trees swaying in the wind, which, if anything, seemed to have become even stronger. It would push the fire right on top of them soon. It was difficult to get any sense of orientation, but he noted that they had been steadily climbing. The ground had changed from forest-bottom soil to more and more granite. The trees were thinning. "He's taking us to the high point," Peter said. That's it. Dog saves the day, more or less.
Yeah, that's a wonderful reading. Thank you. Great to hear a bit where the dog saves the day. Awesome. Thank you very, very much. So a reminder to the audience that you have still got time to type your questions into the Q&A if you have questions for any or all of the writers. And we actually have a question we're asking all of the writers at BarkFest that I'm going to put to all three of you now, which is we're asking everybody what brings them hope for the dog-human relationship. So I'm going to start with you, Philipp. What brings you hope for the dog-human relationship?
There's just so much interest now, and dogs are no longer viewed as a child's pet or something in the backyard, or in many cases something that a creature that's has a functional value. Really, the movement of cats, dogs, in particular cats also, into the center of human families is something I've been in practice 34 years now. 34 years ago, if somebody said mom or dad in reference to their dog, that would have resulted in snickers. People would have felt very self-conscious. It was very rare. It is the norm now. People understand these are not like human children, right? There is a distinction, but the change in the language speaks to a change in how we value them and how we view them, and that can only be a positive.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. Thank you. Louisa, what brings you hope for the dog-human relationship? And you're on mute.
That helps. When I saw this question was coming, I had a long think about it. And often when you look on the internet, you get a lot of people either ranting about dogs, or lots of, in the comment section, there's awful stuff, or dog trainers who are trainers. But actually, when I go out on my walk with Max, I experience the opposite. I experience, some really welcoming, friendly people who are happy to like chat and talk about their dogs. And, I know the names of the dogs. I have no idea what they're called, but I know their dogs' names. And some really lovely dogs and the majority are off lead, under control, off lead, and happy to play with Max. And it's a really positive interaction. So I think that gives me sort of hope for the future, in that, people are sensible. We do have common sense. We know what we're doing with our dogs, and, the majority of the interactions I have are very positive.
That's great. That's lovely. Thank you. And Anthony, what brings you hope for the dog-human relationship?
So my answer is actually very similar to Philipp's and Louisa's, along the same lines. One of the things one of the reasons I'm very interested in your book, Zazie, is because one of my old lurchers was a very reactive dog, like to the point that we had to muzzle him when we walked him in public. And as a result, we saw a lot of different approaches to dog training. And one of the things that gives me hope is that I've noticed in the last 5 to 10 years, negative reinforcement training is really on the outs. Like almost nobody does it anymore. And it's all about positive reinforcement training, which we found to be the answer with our dog, with both of our lurchers. In fact, positive reinforcement was so much more effective than negative reinforcement. And that gives me hope, in that I think it's part of people seeing dogs as Philipp said, as part of the family, as Louisa said, people getting to know their dogs. I think it's part of people just sort of accepting that dogs are dogs, but they have brains. They're not property. Like here in the UK, dogs are literally legally seen as property. Somebody steals your dog, they will, and even abuses it or something, they will be done for theft, as if it's property, not for, any kind of kidnapping or anything. It's quite, there's a lot of people fighting to change that at the moment, have been for years. So I think the trend towards positive reinforcement, I think it just sort of reinforces that attitude is changing. And I think that can only be a good thing.
Great. Thank you. And I know that Christy has a question as well.
Yeah, one thing that Zazie and I have asked a few other authors that we've talked to on the Positive Posting Conversation is how you go about, I find it really interesting as I'm reading, as someone who is a dog professional, to read how you write about dogs. And I think all three of you do a really good job of writing about dogs in a way that honors them as dogs without using them as like a plot device or giving them really weird human, not that that's bad necessarily, like, it's just some books do give dogs powers that they don't actually have as a thing, and we all sort of accept that as we read it. But I like the way that when I'm reading your books, the dogs are just being themselves. And so how do you get into that as an author? How do you make sure that you're not just making them an extra piece of furniture, that you're letting them be a part of the plot, but without turning them into like something that they're not? I love sort of taking a step back from the story and sort of trying to understand how you would do that as an author, because it's really interesting to me. So maybe Philipp, we'll start with you.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm held to a relatively high standard, given that a number of my readers are fellow veterinarians and my clients and so forth. So I better get it right. There's other things that are, other plot devices I use not related to the dogs or any of the animals that are perhaps not exactly fantastical, and there's no magic or anything like that. But there's a stretch of the imagination that occurs, like some pretty improbable coincidences and occurrences, just because it's fun to write. But when it comes to the science, I'm like a hardcore science guy myself, and the animals, I got to get it right.
Right. Yeah, for sure. The outside forces are, as people will email.
That's right. You bet.
Antony.
So part of the reason that I wanted to write, these kinds of books and put the dogs in them was because I've come across so many books and even TV shows where a dog is introduced and then promptly forgotten about. And for the rest of the book or show, I'm thinking like, who's feeding this dog? Who's walking this dog? Where is the dog? Have they locked them away? What's going on? And so, as a dog owner, as a dog lover, I wanted to write something that other dog owners and lovers would recognize and go, yes, that is what it's like to own a dog or to look after a dog in the case of Gwinny dog sitting them. So it's a very deliberate and specific thing, to treat them as real dogs. Now, as Philip said, there are, sometimes I stretch coincidence. And Gwinny herself will anthropomorphize the dogs sometimes. She talks about them, kind of in slightly human ways. But I think, and I hope it comes across in the writing, that is her internal voice. It's again, nothing magical, not psychic or anything like that. Also, I just want to quickly say, because Philip mentioned this earlier, yes, nothing bad happens to the dogs. That is literally a line that I put in the pitch for the series, and you'll find it on the marketing for the books as well. Very clear about that.
Perfect. Louisa, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I would first of all agree, nothing bad happens to the dog. It's it's a rule we live by, which is hard when you have police dogs. But in respect of making them sort of key to the story, I think in my case it's very easy because they are essentially the thing that propels the plot forward. So in the first one, Lucy has Moss, who's a specialist search dog. But there's also Pete, who you get to meet, who's one of her colleagues, and he has Dax, who is a general purpose dog. So the dogs are literally propelling the plot forward by what they're doing. And I think the things police dogs and police handlers do every day is absolutely astonishing. Like the situations they're thrown into, the trust that dogs have in their handlers and the handlers have in their dogs. Because they're essentially their partner. Generally they don't have a human partner, they have dogs. And most of them would probably say they would rather have their dogs than have a human by the side. So I think just that in itself is remarkable. My challenge, unfortunately, is that police dog handlers don't actually investigate murders. So I have to sort of break the rules a little bit. And that's where Jack comes in, who is he's the head of the major crimes unit. He does investigate murders. So the two of them have to sort of work together in a way that maybe they wouldn't normally. But I sort of like that friendship between them, and it's that, and he doesn't like dogs, so it's the sort of slow friendship that also Jack gets with Moss, and later Iggy, her other dog, is sort of quite nice to see as well, and his evolution. But yes, I'm not sure I've answered your question, but yeah, in a way it's sort of easy for me because the dogs are so incredible.
Right. Cool. Thank you. It's so interesting to hear your perspectives and I love thinking about how people write books rather than just how we consume them.
Yes, yeah. And I want to make sure that every author gets the chance to tell us about their next book, because these books are all fantastic. They're actually very different books, but I loved every one of them. And I know that you each have another book coming. So I'm going to ask you to tell us about what comes next. We'll start with you, Antony, please.
So the next book in this series, I mentioned it earlier, it's called The Dog Sitter Detective Plays Dead. And that is out in January, here in the UK anyway. In the US, it may be a month or two later. The distributors seem to delay things. But ebook certainly will be out in January in the US. So in that book, Gwinny is on set, on location. She has a small part in a film, a gender-reversed remake of Dracula. And she is playing Dr. Jacqueline Seward. And she's there on location in the Yorkshire Dales at a country house, using that as a backdrop for the set. But one of the actors is found dead in a locked trailer with a stake through their heart. And so while they try to carry on filming amidst this terrible, tragedy, the police are also investigating. Gwinny takes it upon herself to help with the investigation, and meanwhile she's also looking after this Jack Russell Terrier, which belongs to a friend of hers who lives nearby, that she's having to look after. So it's somewhat chaotic, but we have a locked trailer mystery, as it were. And like I said, that's out in January.
Love it. Can't wait. Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely on my reading list. Louisa, what's next? Not what's next in with PC Lucy Halliday.
So the next one is, this is actually a proof, but the cover looks a little bit like this. It says it's every family's worst nightmare, if it's not the wrong way around. It's called Memorial Park. It's out in February, and it's about when a 3-year-old goes missing in Memorial Park. And Lucy is obviously sent out with Iggy to track and try and find missing 3-year-old Rosie. But it also links into something that sort of started in Gallows Wood, which I don't want to sort of spoiler at the moment, but it's an event in Jack's past where a child went missing when he was 11. So they find some evidence that connects to that. So it's the two sort of missing children, one cold case, one sort of very real, very now, as they sort of intersect and all the secrets and everything related to that. But yeah, it's lots of fun. I really like it.
Yeah, that sounds very compelling. I'm looking forward to that one too. Thank you. And Philip, what's next for you? We actually get a little taster of it in the back of 11 Huskies.
Well, and in fact, 2 books are next, because that's not even next. So that is next in the Bannerman series. So 3 Bengal kittens. Yes, there's a teaser chapter at the end. Peter's brother, Sam, an artist, formerly living in Toronto, fallen on hard times, moved to Winnipeg. Fortunately, he's a bit of a hoarder, and he has some issues. He has to be in, particularly, he's in this apartment building where a person turns up dead, and Sam is the principal suspect. He's looking after the 3 Bengal kittens that belong to the murder victim. So Peter gets involved for obvious reasons, and mayhem ensues. But out before then, next July will be Heal the Beasts, a jaunt through the curious history of the veterinary arts. I've written a history of veterinary medicine for the general reader from 14,000 BC, where we have evidence of people, Paleolithic people in Germany using, in Central Europe, using herbs to cure a puppy, try to cure a puppy with distemper. We can sort all that out through to the modern day. Just it's full of, I mean, there's just so much. The stories of humans healing animals is so interesting, and it's kind of circular too in terms of motivations and so forth. So I'm excited about that. That's out in July.
That sounds really interesting. I look forward to that as well. That's very cool. Okay, I think that's all we have time for, unfortunately. But just to remind everyone that after this, I will be doing a draw, and someone has the chance to win a copy of Antony's book, The Dog Sitter Detective Takes the Lead, Louisa Scarr's book, Gallows Wood, as well as 11 Huskies by Dr. Philipp Schott, and also a copy of my new book, Bark, which is available for pre-order now and out on the 1st of October. So I will do that as soon as the video has finished processing, and I will email one of you to let you know who's won. And thank you so much to our authors today, Antony, Louisa, Philip. It's been wonderful to hear about your books. I love all of your books, and it's been such a pleasure to hear you talk about them and to hear you do the readings. And I know I'm going to be reading all the ones that are coming out too. So thank you very, very much for joining us today. Thank you to Christy for helping me to co-host this. Thank you to Greystone Books for some help behind the scenes of BarkFest, and thank you so much to the audience. We've seen lots of positive comments coming through from the audience, so thank you so much to all of you for being here as well. And there is still time to sign up for the remaining events at BarkFest, so go to my website and you can sign up for those there. Thank you very much. Thank you, Antony, Louisa, Philip. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Zazie. It's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes. Bye-bye.